Incredible moment, Waitress' unexpected calm during 5-minute robbery transformed everyone's lives. It was just another ordinary Friday night at the diner, the familiar hum of laughter weaving through the air, when everything shifted. Sarah, a 34-year-old waitress, stood at the edge of her second double shift that week, pouring coffee into a chipped mug for a regular. The warm aroma wrapped around her, providing a momentary comfort from the relentless anxiety of her life, a teenage son, Ethan, dreaming of college, and mounting medical bills for her ailing father. Each day felt like a weight on her shoulders, a constant balancing act between duty and despair. But tonight would be different. Just as the clock ticked past 8, the door swung open with a crash, and a masked man burst in, desperation radiating from every part of him. The cheerful atmosphere shattered like glass as his shaky voice demanded cash from the register. The diner turned into a frozen tableau of fear, eyes wide, breaths caught as panic gripped the air. But amid the chaos, a flicker of determination ignited within Sarah. Could she really face this? She could feel her pulse quickening, the tight knot of dread tightening in her chest. What if this ended badly? A mother's instinct kicked in. She would do anything to protect the patrons she had come to care for, to shield Ethan's future from violence. So, without thinking, she stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace, a defiant calm enveloping her as she spoke. "Hey, it's okay. Just take a moment. What is going on with you?" Her voice was surprisingly steady, a lifeline thrown into a turbulent sea. It jolted everyone back, capturing the attention of the masked stranger and creating a moment of uneasy silence. Sarah's mind raced. Who was this masked man? Did he have a sick child? Lost his job? Just like her, could he be drowning in responsibilities he couldn't face alone? I just need the cash, he replied, his voice wavering. Behind the mask, she saw anger mixed with pain, a heartbreaking human story lurking beneath the surface. A sick kid, hospital bills. Compassion flared within her, sparking an unexpected connection in the midst of crisis. Before she could grasp the implications, a loud crash resonated from the kitchen, a server dropping a tray. Sarah's heart lurched, taking a step back as anxiety surged anew. Just when the tension was beginning to ease, she felt it snap. What had seemed a fragile bridge between empathy and fear was now fracturing. Could she maintain this delicate standoff? Panic overtook reason, yet she dug deep, questioning everything she held true about bravery. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tension surged again, the masked man's grip faltering, but her heart raced with uncertainty. Would he back down? In the eye of this storm, she felt herself unraveling. Desperation manifested into chaos, a world twisting beyond comprehension. Every second stretched like an eternity as she faced him, knowing the weight of her next words could save lives or escalate into horror. The strangers surrounding her shifted restlessly, haunted by what could transpire next. With the distant wail of sirens cutting through the air, her resolve trembled. Lives hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of potential violence, and Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped deeper into the abyss. The diner stood poised for a decision, a moment marked by trembling breaths and the pure need for human connection. Would her courage be enough to change the outcome of this night? In that heart-stopping moment, Sarah's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. What would she say next? The stakes were impossibly high, and every second felt like an eternity. The masked man remained tense, his breath coming in bursts, and she could see the sweat glistening on his forehead. He wasn't just scared, he was desperate. A sudden determination surged within her, an urgency to turn this fear into understanding. Look, she said, lowering her hand slightly, trying to appear less threatening. I get it. You're in a tough place. But this isn't the solution. As her words hung in the air, she felt her heart pounding with the weight of untested courage. This wasn't just about saving herself or the diner, this was about human connection. She took one step closer, narrowing the distance between herself and the man behind the mask. "I can help you. Just tell me what you need." He hesitated, wavering. She could see the internal battle flickering behind those darkened eyes. Sarah thought about stories she'd heard from other patrons, unexpected hardships, financial struggles, sickness. Their shared humanity bridged the gap, and she instinctively leaned into it, hoping to pull him back from the edge he was teetering on. I don't know what else to do." His voice cracked, a devastated whisper that echoed through the diner. "My son is sick, his mom left, and I lost my job. I'm so scared." His story resonated with her. Just like that, a connection ignited, a father lost in despair, much like her own struggle to support Ethan and care for her father. "You can't do this," she urged, wanting him to see that this choice would only drag him deeper into a pit of despair. "There are other options. I can help you find them." The quiet words felt weighted with a promise she was ready to act, to forge a path for him that wouldn't require this dark turn. Yet in that fragile moment, doubt crept in. Could a few kind words truly change the course of this night? Was there enough power within her to ignite hope? Suddenly, the sound of sirens became sharper, closer, an approaching storm that could obliterate this tender moment. Time slipped through her fingers like sand, teasing thoughts of failure. What if he panicked? What if he lashed out in fear, driving the entire room towards disaster? A flashpole of resolve fired through her. This wasn't about manipulating the situation, it was about authenticity. Taking a deep breath, she allowed herself to be vulnerable. "I'm scared too," she confessed, locking eyes with him. "You're not alone. I know the pain of being lost and feeling like there's no way out. But I promise, when we work together, you'll find a better path. We all can." He stared at her as if seeing a glimmer of light in an otherwise suffocating darkness. A flicker of hope danced in his eyes, yet he still grappled with fear. Sarah shifted her posture, embodying both strength and compassion, waiting for his next move with her heart racing. In that suspended moment, she realized, her own transformation was occurring. Through this daunting confrontation, she found a strength she never knew lived inside her, a sense of purpose that extended beyond her own struggles, a spark that might light the way for someone else. But just as she prepared for his response, a shattered sound pierced her focus. The door crashed open, and figures flooded the diner. She turned, her breath catching in her throat as the scene erupted into shadows and chaos. Would her courage hold fast as the situation spiraled? The moment of truth was at hand, and Sarah braced herself for whatever would unfold next. Thoughts collided in Sarah's mind as the chaos unfolded. The masked man's grip on his weapon shifted, a flicker of instinctive fear flaring within him, no longer just a desperate father. She could see the struggle written across his face, torn between the undulating waves of panic crashing against the stillness of her presence. In the face of chaos, Sarah felt a strange stillness within her. It was as if the world slowed, allowing her a moment to gather her thoughts, a clarity amid the storm. Where before she had only glimpsed what her capabilities might hold, now they blossomed within her, demanding to be harnessed. "Stay calm," she murmured, her voice a gentle anchor in the maelstrom. It was less a command directed at him and more a mantra for herself. She allowed the cacophony of shattered glass and frenzied voices to fade from her immediate awareness. Instead, she concentrated on the father, feeling a strange sense of purpose crystallize around them. He was not just a threat but a person grasping for the last of life's straws. The figures that had burst into the diner were no longer threatening shadows but obstacles to navigate. She had to reach the father standing before her, she had to find the thread of vulnerability that would unravel the situation before it spiraled further into madness. "Please," she said, stepping closer, her heart steadying. "Let us talk. Look at what is unfolding around us. We can stop this from becoming worse." A flicker of confusion flashed across his face. Sarah seized that moment, allowing her voice to soften. "I understand your fear, but this isn't the way. We can find another route together. She stretched out her hands a little further, showing him she was willing, that she partnered with him instead of opposing him. Frantic footsteps echoed behind Sarah. The unmistakable sound of police officers responding to the chaos settled in her awareness. Time was against them. The inevitable reckoning of uniformed authority would arrive, and the weight of their consequences loomed. "Look at me," she insisted. "We have a choice. You can be seen as a father trying to save his child, someone who made a mistake in a moment of desperation, rather than as a criminal." His eyes narrowed, processing her words. With the urgency swelling in the air and the distant wail of sirens closing in, she could see the flicker of uncertainty transform into contemplation. Maybe it was the hope emanating from her sincerity, or maybe it was the recognition of the storm threatening to engulf him. In that moment, she understood that her own fears about being inadequate, the latent doubts bred from years of hardship, were irrelevant now. By embracing her vulnerability, Sarah had turned it into her greatest strength. "What can I do?" he finally asked, vulnerability washing over him like a tide receding from the shore. The gun trembled in his hand, like an all-too-rapid heartbeat. Sarah could feel it, the shift, the breakthrough clarity woven into his words. "You start by lowering that weapon. We'll figure out the rest together," she urged, her voice steady, her heart swelling with a strange blend of hope and fear. As he hesitated, uncertainty written all over his face, she held her breath. She felt the moment threading toward resolution, yet every heartbeat rang with danger. Suddenly, the door burst open again, and chaos resumed its vicious grip. Uniformed officers flooded into the diner, shouting orders and commands. What would happen next? Would they see her as an ally, or would the turmoil blind them to her defiance? Sarah's commitment to connect, to heal the rift between fear and humanity, surged anew. This was not only about saving lives but evolving herself into the person she needed to be for this moment. The stakes loomed higher than ever, and as the masked man hesitated, another voice rang out, louder than chaos itself. "Hands up! Everyone, down on the ground!" Would she retain her newfound courage as the situation transformed yet again, testing her determination to stand firm in the face of adversity? The moment was precarious, testing the steel of her burgeoning character in a world of chaos. The piercing commands from the officers cut through the air like a knife, exacerbating an already frayed atmosphere. Sarah felt the weight of her own heartbeat thrum in her ears, a steady rhythm amid the encroaching chaos. She could no longer ignore the fear swelling in the room. It was palpable, thick enough to sculpt into a shape that could fill the diner. But at this critical juncture, she clung to her last thread of purpose, to defuse the situation. "He's just scared," she shouted over the din, her voice rising, a desperate hope in her tone. "Let us talk." The scene around her felt surreal, as if she were observing it from underwater, where sounds distorted and moved in slow motion. A commanding officer, his stance unwavering, eyed her warily. She could sense their uncertainty about her intentions, as if they were weighing the risk of her unorthodox intervention. Yet, Sarah steadfastly faced the reality before her, knowing that this crisis formed the very crucible of her growth. She couldn't shrink back now. The father remained in his hesitant stance, gun still wavering. The officers were shouting to him, demanding compliance, but Sarah could see the flicker of resolve struggling against despair crawling back into his eyes as the onslaught of commands escalated. She was ready to risk everything to follow through with her approach. "Listen to what they're saying, but listen to me too," she whispered urgently. "You're not alone. Not right now." Each word dripped with empathy, aimed directly at the father, even as the atmosphere prickled with tension. She needed to shift the focus, to connect with the humanity behind the mask. Suddenly, amidst the escalating noise, she felt the undeniable surge of her vulnerability. It had transformed, no longer something to shield but a beacon to guide her. Stepping forward, she raised her hands in a display of openness, unguarded, revealing her willingness to be part of the solution, not just another figure contributing to the fear. The officer's voice ricocheted through the diner, "Put the weapon down. There's no way out." Swallowing hard, Sarah seized that moment of chaos. "You can set down your fear too," she urged, directing her intention toward the father. It's okay to ask for help. You fought bravely, but there's still a way back to safety. Time seemed to stretch as silence nestled in the wake of her words. Everyone held their breath, caught in a fragile web of possibilities. She recognized that this might not guarantee success, but the act itself, her decision to step forward, signaled an evolution within her. She had shed layers of previous insecurities and anchored herself in her purpose. Just as the father wavered, the approaching officers shifted as well, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. Sarah could see them reevaluating her role in this moment. Was she an ally or a risk? It twisted like a double-edged sword in her gut. To some, she might appear reckless, but to her, every heartbeat pulsed with the importance of this choice. Then, without warning, the father dropped to his knees, releasing the weapon as if it burned his fingers. He had finally listened not just to her, but to the raw humanity buried beneath his panicked eye. In that instant, Sarah saw the dawn of transformation in both his expression and among the officers who now hesitated, processing the unexpected turnaround. The decision had been made, the course altered. Yet the aftermath of her defiance remained uncharted, and the uncertainty pulsed heavily in the air. Would her newfound strength hold through the revelations that would unfold after this pivotal moment, or would the emerging complexities of the situation threaten her resolve? Questions swirled in her mind, echoing an insistent truth. She was just beginning to unravel a journey that would test her in ways she had yet to comprehend. As she gazed into the faces of the officers, awaiting their next move, a single thought loomed larger than the chaos around her. How would she navigate the aftermath of this rupture, both for herself and for those entangled in this tumultuous reality? The air grew heavy as the father collapsed onto the floor, and Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had breached the barricade of fear. But as the officers moved in to secure the scene, a blend of dread and anticipation danced within her. "Stay back!" one officer barked, raising his weapon toward the father. Sarah's heart dropped. Had she truly diffused the tension, or merely substituted one kind of danger with another? The father's expression shifted from desperation to confusion as the officers shouted orders, their pace quickening, the very chaos she aimed to quell rippling anew. "Wait. Just give him a moment," she implored, stepping tentatively into the fray. Each word felt like a delicate negotiation, testing the thin thread of trust she had woven. The officers hesitated, casting furtive glances between her and the downed man. In that instant, she sensed their undercurrents: doubt, fear, and even a hint of admiration for her audacity. "Ma'am," an officer said, lowering his voice but not his weapon, "you don't understand the danger here." And yet, the danger was alive and real, pulsing through each breath of the trembling father on the ground. "You don't understand how close he was," she countered, her voice steady as she forced her body to remain calm. "He just needs a moment to breathe. Isn't that what we all need sometimes?" The officer shifted his stance, processing her plea as if it were a foreign concept. For Sarah, the very notion of needing time was an uncomfortable truth she'd grappled with long before this moment. But wasn't it exactly what united them all, tethering each human being to another? In this charged standoff, she stood in a pocket of vulnerability, her own heartbeat reverberating against the walls of the diner, a reminder that everyone here held a story entangled with desperation and hope. She had stepped forward, yet remained firmly rooted in her purpose to navigate the rough waters of fear with empathy as her guide. As the sobering reality of her bold choice settled over the scene, she realized that her personal evolution was hinged on self-awareness. Would she maintain this newfound resilience in the face of disapproval, or let the weight of societal judgment drag her back into silence? "Please," she repeated softly, returning her gaze to the father, who had lifted his head slightly, vulnerability etched in his features. "Look at me. You're not alone." For the first time, she recognized a flicker of hope in his eyes, a small ember igniting amidst the shadow of despair. The tension in the room felt palpable, an electric charge that built towards a release, and it rested solely on her shoulders now. Her instincts screamed at her to retreat and let the professionals handle it, yet the urgency to stay grounded and fight through her apprehension surged like a tidal wave. Ma'am, the officer pressed, challenging her stance, this is a dangerous situation. You could be making it worse. And therein lay her moral crossroads. Would she back down, or risk more than she ever had for a flicker of possible redemption? As she faced the officer, a sense of determination surged within her. She imagined every interaction she had shared in the diner, every personal crisis brought to light by the warmth of a simple cup of coffee, and it steered her resolve. The moment hung, suspended in time, and the world around her faded to the periphery. It was just her, the father, and the officers suspended in a crucible of transformation. She knew another twist awaited her when the space quieted too long, and the pressure grew heavy, threatening to crack the fragile truth she had forged. Then, as if sensing her unwavering commitment, she shifted her focus, preparing for a new challenge, one that promised to unravel the very core of her beliefs and test the limits of her courage in ways she never anticipated. What paths lay before her now, and how would she navigate the chaos of emerging realities? The answers felt tantalizingly close yet devastatingly obscure, urging her to delve deeper into both her inner and outer struggles. Sarah felt the weight of the moment press down on her shoulders, her resolve encased in a fragile silence. The father's breath was a faint whisper now, a lifeline she dared to grasp. As she locked eyes with both him and the officer who hovered, she understood the incongruence of her actions. Here she was, a waitress embroiled in a pivotal encounter, not a trained negotiator. Yet the more she remained anchored in empathy, the clearer her instincts became. Focus on your breath, she said softly to the father. Inhale for 4, hold it for 4, exhale for 4. That's it. You're not alone in this. She could feel the tension in the room shift as her words wove an invisible thread of connection between their struggles, the officer's fear, the father's despair, and even her own uncertainty. The officer glanced down, weapon still raised but with less conviction. There was a brief flicker of doubt in his gaze, a query of trust toward Sarah. He'd weighed his fear against her courage and found himself faltering. In this charged environment, she realized she was no longer simply a participant, she was the catalyst of change. Yet this realization came with its own burden. She could sense her heart racing, pushing against the confines of her chest. Was she truly capable of guiding them all through this chaos, or was she merely grasping at straws, flailing against an inevitable tide? Questions zipped through her mind like bullets, each one ricocheting off her self-confidence, which had felt so solid moments before. Ma'am, another officer interjected sharply, determined to reclaim control of the situation, we need to move in. You're endangering yourself. For a moment, Sarah's world spiraled. The familiar diner felt foreign, the smells and sounds morphing into a fever dream. The faces around her, once comforting, now bore an intensity she couldn't reconcile. Their eyes were judging, questioning, expecting her to falter, but she couldn't. Not now. Do you trust me? She implored, her voice steady, though her insides churned. The father, his features softening, nodded slowly. It was tentative, but it was enough. That one small act validated her place in this moment. She had moved from being an observer to an active participant, however tenuous that participation felt. Just a moment, she reiterated firmly, her gaze shifting to the officers. Allow me this chance. Just this moment. Subconsciously, she gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles whitening with determination. Here, amid the chaos, she found the slightest edge of her strength. It lay in vulnerability and the admission of her own fear. Something shifted among the officers, an unspoken deliberation passing between them. They weren't just witnessing a potential breakdown, they were grappling with her unexpected intervention. This was no longer just a desperate father, it was an opportunity to reconsider their own roles in crises. The father began to breathe, constructing a fragile foundation to his lucidity under the surprising shelter of Sarah's calm. It was a process that took time, the seconds stretching like elastic, but she could see his resolve inching back. The hope flickered brighter with every controlled breath he took, but her heart raced, she was on the precipice. Every decision led to new repercussions, new challenges. Would the officers seize the moment or leap into chaos? She couldn't ignore the gnawing tension seeping back in as she considered the immediate future. For Sarah, it was more than a test of courage, it became a personal reckoning. It dawned on her that she wasn't just tending to someone else's crisis, she was uncovering her own vulnerability moment by moment, breath by breath. Despite the dark uncertainty, she felt a strange clarity emerge, beckoning her to confront deeper truths. As if to reaffirm, her heart thundered not with fear but with a burgeoning conviction she could navigate this chaos, and just as the thought settled within her, the officers turned their intent back towards her, fixing their gazes as they weighed their next move. With each heartbeat, she sensed the gravity of their decision, knowing full well that whatever they chose would define not just the outcome of this chaotic moment but her very self. What if? She thought, eyes narrowing with determination. This was not merely a challenge, it was an invitation to confront herself, to step unwaveringly into the storm of change. The moment hung poised, ready to plunge into the unknown. What metamorphosis awaited her once the final string snapped taut? Only time would reveal the enormity of the transformations ahead. The tension in the room was palpable as Sarah locked eyes with the police officers, each second stretching into eternity. A flicker of uncertainty danced across their faces, revealing that beneath their authority lay a shared trepidation. Did they truly comprehend the potential ramifications of their next actions? At that moment, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders more heavily than ever. "Listen to me," she urged, her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere, "we can all walk away from this. We just need to breathe and work together." The urgency in her tone was born from the realization that it wasn't merely about the father and the gun, it was about navigating the fragile line between fear and hope. As the father steadied his breathing, Sarah turned her attention back to the officers. "I'm asking you to put the guns down," she said, her words flowing with an intensity driven by newfound conviction. "Let us de-escalate together. I know it feels dangerous, but moving in could trigger a reaction we all regret." The officers exchanged glances, their postures ever so slightly relaxing as they processed Sarah's plea. She could see them weighing her suggestion against a backdrop of training, instinct, and fear. Here she was, a waitress, a stranger, and yet she had somehow wove herself into the fabric of this tumultuous moment, a thread threatening to unravel their preconceived notions. In that brief silence, Sarah confronted her own doubt. Who was she to challenge trained professionals in a life-and-death scenario? But as she gazed at the father, still trembling yet focused on his breaths, she felt the crescendo of her own resolve. This was a fight not just for him, but for herself. She was no longer just the girl who served coffee, she was willing to stand up for something greater. "Please." The father's voice broke the stillness, raw and exposed. "I just want to see my daughter again." The stark vulnerability in his plea sliced through the air. Something glistened in the officer's eyes, perhaps it was a reflection of their own vulnerabilities, the brandished weapon suddenly feeling like a heavier burden. It was a metaphorical mirror. They were not just enforcers but human beings grappling with their own fears, but, even as the atmosphere shifted, Sarah sensed the precariousness of time. Each second felt like a countdown to potential chaos. "We need to slow down," she said, shifting her posture to fully face the officers. "Assess the risk. Rushing will only breed desperation on both sides." A moment passed, thick with uncertainty, before one officer finally lowered his weapon slightly, the gesture catching on like a spark amidst dry tinder. It was a surrendering act that resonated, not just through the room, but deep within Sarah. What had she just done? In that instant, a light ignited within her, a flicker of clarity that illuminated the path ahead. She understood now, she did not need to wear the badge to assume authority in this moment. The true power lay in authentic connection, and she felt the potential of her influence stirring, but clarity betokened its own confusion. Now that she had garnered their attention and respect, what path would she advocate for next? She could not step back now, she had drawn them into her orbit. "You need to trust me," she breathed, her eyes darting between the officers and the father. "I need you to see him, as a father. Not just the man holding a gun." Curiosity washed over the officers as the father's resolve deepened in response to Sarah's compassion. Could she really lead them all to safer shores? The mounting pressure pulled taut around her heart, amplifying the stakes. Her heart raced. This was far from over. The moment felt suspended, a precarious balance teetering on the edge of chaos or peace. And then, out of nowhere, the realization hit her like a wave. She had the potential to emerge not only as a savior in this immediate crisis but as a beacon for her own capacity to inspire change. The enormity of it flooded her mind, setting her muscles on fire with purpose and intensity. Just hold on. She implored, her voice surging with an undercurrent of determination. We can change the narrative. In that vivid moment, as the father sought to quell his despair, Sarah confronted her own fears. The room held its breath, awaiting the next move. What would unfold? Would she draw upon this newfound understanding to anchor herself further in the unfolding chaos, or would she falter under the weight of possibility? It was her next decision that could change everything, and she felt herself teetering on the brink of redefining who she was destined to be. The call to action loomed, and within that electrifying threshold, she mused, what could she discover about her resilience next? The moment hung heavy in the air, a taut string ready to snap. Sarah's heart thundered as she assessed the faces of the police officers, searching for the spark of understanding she'd just ignited. As the seconds passed, the tension in the air felt electric, jolting her into hyper-awareness of her surroundings. The father's desperate, pained expression rooted her to her mission to find a way to defuse the emotional bomb that threatened to detonate. Look, she spoke again, this time softer yet firm, he's not just a threat. He's a father in crisis. We need to connect with him. As she spoke, a sense of urgency morphed into clarity in her own mind. She was here for a reason, a quiet rebellion against her previous self who had always accepted the sidelines. No more backtracking to the familiarity of serving tables, staring into faces of faceless patrons. She wanted to be more, to step into her own influence. Sarah met the gaze of the nearest officer, their steel facade beginning to crack. We can humanize this, she urged. You have the tools. You perhaps trained for this. But right now, we need empathy more than force. Internal thoughts spun through her mind. Who was she to speak like this? But she had felt that shift, the moment they lowered their weapons. She had tasted the awakening of power. It sparked a battle between the fear of failure and the hope of success, igniting within her a deep-seated determination. She took a breath, trying to ground herself in this moment's gravity. Let me talk to him, she said, her voice trembling as she fought against the waves of uncertainty threatening to crash over her resolve. Just for a minute. Just 1 minute, while we all breathe. A fleeting silence enveloped the room once more. The officers regarded one another, deliberating the next course of action as if it could alter their entire career. Sarah sensed their hesitation morphing into something else, curiosity. She had stirred something within them, a flicker of belief that maybe she could bring this back from the edge. Time seemed to elongate until finally, with a nod, an officer stepped forward, lowering his weapon as an act of good faith. Fine, but we'll be right here, he instructed, voice tight but understanding. Thank you, she breathed, a butterfly of fear fluttering in her stomach as she approached the father. Each step felt monumental, a bridge to a past version of herself she was leaving behind. Hey, she said gently. I know you're scared. I can't imagine how trapped you must feel right now. She reached out her hand, her palms open, a non-threatening gesture trying to connect to the man who felt most like an enemy. For a moment, his brow furrowed, disbelief shadowing his features. But the desperation in his eyes softened as he took a shuddering breath. I just want to see my daughter, he reiterated, a mix of anguish and longing cracking through his voice. That's all anyone wants, Sarah responded, her tone steadying as she saw the raw humanity beneath his panic. Right now, I need to know, what would you say to her if you could? In that split second, she recognized her own strength emerging. She was wrestling not only with his despair but also weaving her own authenticity into the fabric of this dangerous equation. Her moral compass no longer just pointed towards safety but to a mission to convey powerful truths, but with each moment that passed, the fragile bridge was falling under the weight of uncertainty as the officers watched, their patience audibly thinning. What if I fail? She thought. Her fingers itched to reach for backup, to retreat to safety, yet she remained tethered to the space between them. What if we could fix this together? She whispered, meeting the father's gaze with unwavering intensity. Sarah recognized the stakes escalating, her heart racing as she realized the gravity of her position. Could she truly guide this tumult towards resolution, or would chaos engulf them? As she stood at the precipice of change, the conviction burned in her chest, igniting a question that echoed louder than any fear: what was she capable of when the world demanded her step forward? Just as the father began to reply, a sudden noise burst from outside, an unexpected siren wailing from a distance, and in that moment, the whispers of her own inadequacy rose up against the sounds of hope. What would she do next? The siren's wail clung to the air like a warning. It was the sound of urgency, and it cut through the charged atmosphere like a knife. An instinctive dread clawed at Sarah's heart. She felt time fracture as if she were caught in a surreal world. The father's eyes widened, reflecting her own panic, a mutual recognition of potential chaos washing over them both. In that heartbeat, Sarah envisioned her before the momentary silence, a waitress dodging angry customers and quickly pouring coffee, forever trapped in roles that suffocated her sense of purpose. Yet there she was, at the precipice of becoming what she had longed to be, someone who could make a difference. "Stay with me," she urged, locking her gaze on him. The resolve that bubbled within her began to overpower her doubt. Each second was crucial. The siren rang louder, and it became her rallying cry. "Let us imagine," Sarah continued, her words flowing from a deeper place, one she hadn't yet fully explored. "Imagine she is standing right here with us. What would you want her to know?" Her voice dropped to a near whisper as she leaned in closer, focusing his thoughts on something other than despair. "I would tell her I love her. I'd tell her to stay strong," he stammered, unburdening part of the weight he bore. "Then let that love lead you," she said, employing the same empathy she wished others had extended to her in her own darkest moments. The tremor in her voice ignited in him a spark of recognition. "This doesn't have to end here, not for either of us." The officer's tight posture remained, but their expression shifted, incredulity softly melted into respect. Sarah sensed the mood altering, the potential for change rippling through the scene like a breeze across troubled waters. Her thoughts churned with clarity. This was not merely about de-escalating a standoff, it was a moment of transitional awakening for her own life, each word leading her further away from the shackles of her past. "I refuse to be sidelined," she thought fiercely as the weight of responsibility draped over her shoulders like armor. As the father absorbed her words, his pained bravado began to fade, leaving behind a man vulnerable yet desperate to reconnect with the love he had lost. Could he be saved? "Just hang on," Sarah urged, her pulse quickening with determination. "Take my hand." With the gentlest approach, she extended her palm, hoping to act as both anchor and lifeline. He hesitated, but within moments of their contact, understanding flickered, a connection manifesting, a bridge built not on fear but on shared humanity. "Please, let us make this right," she pleaded, the siren waning in the distance as the empowerment of their moment filled the space. She felt the barriers between them dissolve, a shared journey igniting hope where darkness had reigned. But beneath her growing assurance lurked the chilling specter of doubt. What would happen if he recoiled? What if the officers behind her lost patience? Just as these thoughts began to spiral, she felt the grip of his hand, steadying her resolve. Yet, even as moments unfolded like a cinematic reel, a shrill command from her periphery shattered the fragile calm. "Drop the weapon." An officer shouted, the command echoing like a thunderclap in their intimate space. Sarah's stomach sank. She could feel the shift in energy, the father's fear mingling with her own. The balance they had forged was threatened. The air grew unbearably thick as she realized all her efforts hung by a thread, a slip from safety plunging them into chaos. The stakes had elevated, and she found herself standing again at the intersection of her past and future. "Say something," Sarah urged herself inwardly, grappling with the weight of the moment. What could she say to avert the impending disaster? As tension mounted, the fragile bond began to tremble on the brink of collapse. Just then, a thought pierced through her fear. The time had come to face not just the father's turmoil but her own, the wrapping of old identities and the birth of new potentials. What leap must she take to transform the chaos into clarity? My life isn't just about survival anymore, she whispered, realizing only she could elevate them toward possibility. With the officers and her own fears looming, would she steer this ship back toward calm, or was she on the verge of uncharted waters? The chaos unfurled with acrid tension as Sarah stood, resolute, caught between the father's despair and the officer's demands. She could feel a metamorphosis coursing through her veins. This moment was an inflection point for both of them. Could she really lead them to safety, or was it a fool's errand? Look at me, Sarah commanded gently, her voice a quiet storm. You're not a threat. You're a father. Let us focus on that. Her conviction radiated outward, fueling the fragile connection she had formed. The father trembled, grappling with the tumult raging within. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in his gaze. It was an echo of her own struggles, years spent buried under society's expectations, fearing she was merely a waitress forever trapped. But she was far more than that now. You need to think about her, she continued, eyes locked onto his. What would your daughter want from you in this moment? As silence enveloped them, Sarah could see the darkness parting, even if ever so slightly. She imagined his daughter. His heart spoke painfully through his eyes as memories of love emerged. The flicker of vulnerability brought forth empathy among the officers. Perhaps they too were evaluating the father as a person rather than just a potential threat. Then, a breakthrough, a gasp. The father's gun trembled as he took a shaky step forward, a cascade of emotions flooding out. I just want to be a good father, he admitted brokenly, surrendering some weight he bore alone. I know, Sarah replied, heart racing but steady. Each word was an anchor, a lifeline to bring him back from the deep. Let me help you find that path. Down on your knees, I can see the man buried beneath this pain. The room held its breath, but she could feel the tide shifting. Hope course through the air, palpable and powerful. In that moment, Sarah bravely stepped aside the fear that had long gripped her own life. This was not merely about removing the gun, it was about reclaiming life itself, and she was powerfully aware that she had just rewritten her narrative. She was not only a waitress, she was an agent of change. With every soul in that diner focused on the human connection being forged, the officers began to lower their weapons, recognizing that Sarah was speaking through an authentic connection they could feel. We can turn this around together, she declared. But it begins with honesty. Gazes shifted back to the father, who took a deep breath, the gun wavering before it clattered to the ground, echoing in the stillness like a promise. Every heart in the room felt that shift, a collective weight lifting. Sarah had proven it was possible to reclaim agency in the face of chaos. As the officers moved in, their demeanor shifted from that of tension to concern. They had witnessed a beautiful surrender unfold in front of them, and now they turned their focus toward ensuring every part of this transformation remained safe. Sarah felt a wave of surreal clarity wash over her. She had conquered fear and taken a stand not just on behalf of the father but for all those fighting their inner battles, including herself. Now, a new chapter awaited her. Her fear had become her power. In that diner, she had achieved resonance that echoed far beyond the moment. Sarah knew that this incident wouldn't just transform the lives around her, it would become a catalyst for her self-discovery. As the chaos transformed into an orchestrated recovery, she felt something monumental within, a solid confidence taking root. The realization washed over her, her worth was not tied to her job or circumstances. She had faced terror and emerged transformed, not just a waitress, but a warrior of empathy and connection. Leaving the diner's chaotic scene behind, Sarah stepped into the world with renewed purpose. No longer just bound by duties or despair, she was recognized as a beacon of hope for those yearning for resilience under pressure. Each decision henceforth would stem from the knowledge of her own strength. She held her head high, an unwavering testament to her journey. This was the moment, no turning back, only forward. And as each day unfolded, that familiar weight she'd long been carrying dissipated. She had accepted her calling, to inspire those around her by harnessing the power of empathy in a world steeped in fear. Sarah smiled for the first time in what felt like an eternity, contentment unfolding as she embraced the dichotomy of hope and courage. Her inner transformation cemented her established position as an advocate for not just her own life, but for the lives of those she might continue to touch in unforeseen ways. The journey had only begun. You need to subscribe now to ensure you never miss a life-changing story. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm the fuel it needs for more incredible resilience journeys. Comment below with your thoughts and theories about this conclusion. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who truly need to see how change happens. Don't wait even one more second to impact someone else's life.